This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On Air.
Don't assume that you know what you need to do to make work better. Listen and co-design. And that doesn't have to be, oh my God, we're going to change the whole organization today. You can do it in tiny little fractals, The simplest thing you could do would be in your one-on-ones with people, ask, what's the work you do in your job that you think is low value and reduces your job satisfaction? And how could we change it? Hello and welcome to the Making Work Better podcast, where we'll be sharing the secrets of organizations that are winning with people and performance. I'm Dr. Denise Quinlan and really delighted to be hosting this series where we've got some great leaders for you to listen and learn from. They're sharing practical ideas you can put into action. And today we're taking you behind the scenes on a research project that has filled my mind for the past year. The output from this research is called the Making Work Better report. It was released in late 2024, and I've been getting really great feedback and interest from people in HR who want to know more about it. One of those people is HR leader and performance coach Ruth Christie. So I have invited Ruth to join me today to ask all the questions that HR leaders want to ask about the work. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Ruth. Ruth is a leadership and personal development coach with several decades of experience in HR and organizational development. She knows the well-being and performance pitfalls that many people face in their organizations, and so is absolutely on board with the goal of making work better. Ruth is passionate about emphasizing the human in human resources, which is a huge shared value of ours. And she firmly believes that as the world becomes more digital, our most important asset is our humanness. Ruth's coaching and leadership development work uses POS-Psych, applied neuroscience, wellbeing science, and embodiment practices to help leaders and organizations be great at being human. And if you follow Ruth on LinkedIn, you'll also see regular kind of wellbeing tips and inspiration from her chief wellbeing officer, who is her golden retriever, Sorley, who I'm a big fan of. So welcome, Ruth.
Thank you, Denise. Thanks for having me here.
Delighted to be chatting. And I think I love the work you're doing. And I just think there's so much commonality. So you were the perfect person to come and have a chat this morning, rather than me talk into the void on my own. So how are you?
I'm great, thank you. I'm so excited. I feel like we could sit and make this podcast about 3 weeks long because there's so many things that we love about this topic.
Okay, let's dive in. And we'll both keep an eye on time, because otherwise it could be 3 weeks.
Awesome. Well, you've invited me to take our listeners behind the scenes of this research project, Denise. So let's start at the beginning. What got you interested and what led to this particular piece of work?
So I think if I go back even a couple of years, we were doing a lot of work on resilience and well-being. Post-COVID, organizations wanted us to come in and talk about resilience and talk about preventing burnout. And, there was a point where I got really clear, probably 2022, of saying to people, I will not talk to you about preventing burnout unless we discuss the organizational drivers of burnout and what the organization is doing that may be contributing to it and what you could do to make it better. And so over the last 2 years, what I saw was an increase in burnout, really reaching epidemic levels. But the other thing that I saw was through 2023, a real lack of hope, a real sense of it's a grind and we've got to keep going, but no sense of how we can make it better. And I guess I wanted to find out if what I was seeing was more widespread in New Zealand, and where were what a colleague of mine calls the pockets of promise, where were there people who were actually doing this work well? Was that, and just to check, was that what you were kind of seeing in your work through that time as well?
Yeah, I think so many people found that particular period of time just really crazy and chaotic. And interestingly enough, in my experience, it put the spotlight on resilience and well-being in a lot of organizations, but it feels like it was a little bit temporary. And once the pandemic ended, it was back to, well, if you're lucky, you might get lunchtime yoga and a fruit bowl. But this point that you're making about what are the organizational
Yeah.
factors, and I love that you're saying, I'm not going to talk to you unless you're addressing those things because they're really the big
Yeah.
levers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we did the survey. So the first thing was I was like, right, let's look at this and find out how people are doing. And we did an online survey and asked people about what were the most significant challenges they felt their organization was facing. What did they want their leaders to do better, and also what was working of the stuff that was happening in their organizations, what was actually working. And uh yeah, and it showed up that what we're talking about was definitely more widespread. um the big the most significant challenges were burnout and well-being.
Mm.
And then people talked about culture, about change, and about engagement. And they were all things they felt they were really going to have to look at grasping. And then at that moment in time, staffing was a big concern because there was a window in 2023 where it looked like we had a really tight labor market and organizations were rushing to go, how do we put better packages together? How do we implement flexible and hybrid working so we can be more attractive to people? And then we hit recession and it was like, yeah, no, we'll just lay off. That was the quickest change I have seen in my career in this space.
Yeah, that certainly matches what I've seen and heard even recently from somebody in recruitment, how they're noticing a lot of employers are dialing back some of those good practices that they implemented in that period, and really taking advantage of the fact that it's a softer market. So that's really disappointing for people like us that do this work. And that's why I love what you described as these pockets of promise, the organizations that are doing it well. And hopefully that means those organizations are still doing it well. Can you share a little bit more about what
Yeah,
you
but I'll tell you,
noticed?
at first, so the interesting thing to me is that the the pockets of promise we're going to talk about actually married up quite well with the skills people wanted their leaders to develop.
Mm.
So they they talked about adaptability. They wanted leaders to be able to respond in times of change. They um, they wanted leaders to be able to empower, to collaborate. They really wanted diversity to be valued. And so it was really encouraging to hear that coming through. They wanted better communication. They wanted leaders who would be interested in learning and be able to coach staff. Um, and it wasn't just be nice to me. They wanted leaders who were able to manage conflict, who would hold people accountable, who could provide clarity. Um, they wanted psych safety and inclusivity. And one of the things that really hit me hard was the qualities that kept coming through that they wanted in their leaders. And I think, there is a thread that runs through leadership, I think, over decades. The things that came through were justice, trust, humility, integrity, a positive attitude, confidence, growth mindset, compassion, and courage. And I think that's kind of a list for the ages, isn't it?
Well, as you reciting all those traits, it's like who wouldn't want to work with a leader like that? And I certainly know the leaders that I work with, if you put them in front of them, I think most of them would say, yeah, I'd be happy to be described in that way. So it's aspirational for leaders as well.
Yeah. And I think for me it's saying who you are is how you lead.
Mm.
And one of the big pieces of work for leaders, I talk about future fit leaders. One of the big pieces of work is to work on yourself so that you can actually be that leader. If your ego and your need to prove yourself right and win is getting in the way of you being a good leader. It's like, go and put your psychological house in order. Do whatever coaching you need, go on whatever training you need to crack that and be able to be a good leader. So, yeah. Yeah.
That absolutely speaks to the heart of everything that I stand for in leadership and the work that I do with clients. So I love that. So where did you find those leaders? So in the report, you've got some great examples of organizations, but how did you know where to find the organizations doing the great work?
And I guess, first of all, my concern was like, um, is anyone doing good work? You know, and I was inspired by work that I'd read from the US, Kelly and Moen. So Erin Kelly and Phyllis Moen had done, it was a 5-year live field trial of over 1,000 people in the States in a computer software company. And they had made really practical, simple changes with the organization that had really reduced stress, reduced burnout, made work better. And I was sort of like, well, who's doing it? And I wanted to see if anyone was doing it here, and that was what really kind of drove me initially. And how do we find people? I just kept asking all my networks, who's doing good work? And people came back to me and recommended organizations that were doing interesting work. And it was people like you, people in the OD space, people in the wellbeing space. And so that was an initial list. And then huge shout out to Southern Cross because they invited me to be a judge on their was Wayfinder Awards in last year, which were for organizations that are really leading the way in well-being. And so a number of organizations came to my attention there. Another organization, I was speaking at a kind of an infrastructure conference, and I heard this organization, the two leaders speak, and I'm like beelining for them afterwards, going, "Can I talk to you, please?" Yeah. So it was really kind of it's I think technically we call it a convenience sample, but it was kind of snowball. And so it's not comprehensive. But what was interesting was where they came from, because they're across a lot of sectors. They were organizations that were global and local. They were professions and trades. There's family-owned business in there. There were people doing kind of all face-to-face work and some virtual. And they came from energy, banking, engineering, digital design, professional services, construction, education, and insurance.
Wow.
So I think for me that was really encouraging, that because it says what I think we know is true, that it doesn't matter what kind of organization, what ownership structure, what size, it's possible to do this work.
I love that it was such a diverse spread of organizations. I'm curious, were there, other than the fact that they were doing this good stuff, can you hone in on anything that is a characteristic of those organizations, or any themes that lead you to say this is the kind of organization that's likely to do this well? Is there anything that came out from your findings?
I mean, there were the themes we identified of what they were doing. The driver, like who are the organizations that are going to reach that space? I would say the ones most likely are the ones who actually have a commitment to people. Mm-hmm. The organizations that care about their people are most likely to do it. Next off the rank would be the organizations that realize and really get the fact that well-being is tied to performance and engagement, and even if you don't care about people, you care about the fact that looking after people predicts performance, stability and loyalty and innovation and all the things you want. Mm-hmm. And then kind of the next tier are probably the organizations who are in sectors that are moving fast and they have to keep up, sectors that are really competitive for, say, professional staff, and having the best offering is vital to keep the best staff.
Mm.
So there will be the kind of three stages, I think. And some of these organizations were definitely in the first category of, like, there's a couple of B Corps in there who just believe in being the kind of organization that puts their stakeholders and their employees first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's as you say these things back, it's like, why would nobody want that? Why would anybody not want that? It seems crazy.
Well, we could have okay, I won't rant, but I will say, we've come through an era of shareholder primacy. I have done an awful lot of work on international economics and the evolution of our financial systems over the last 50 years and how that's impacted workers. And I do a lot of work in Europe. So one of the things that fascinates me is how much more worker protection there is in Europe than here. So I was trying to explain 0 hours contracts to somebody in France recently, and they really struggled to get the concept. That you can employ somebody, provide them zero guarantees, only employ them when you want them, and that's okay. And so, for example, in Germany, they've always had two worker representatives on the boards of companies. So workers' interests have always been considered at board level. So it's quite a different environment. And I think what we're seeing, big picture, is a shift from shareholder primacy to more what we're calling stakeholder capitalism.
Mm.
So bring it on, I say.
Absolutely, because we want this to be contagious. We want people, you and I, we want more organizations to adopt this work. So let's get into a bit more of the key themes then, Denise. What were you noticing in terms of what these organizations were doing?
So such a gorgeous job. I love qualitative analysis. So it's sitting with just reams and reams of transcripts and listening again, and realizing that what all of these organizations had in common was a commitment to listening to their people, really deep listening to their people, and acting on what they learned. So there's listening, and then there's co-designing solutions. They're saying, we believe that what you have to say as our frontline experts, doing the job, speaking to our customers and clients, you really understand our systems and processes, and therefore we will involve you in the co-design of solutions to the problems you've identified.
I love that because is there anything more disheartening? Well, good, interesting question. Is it more disheartening to not be listened to or to be listened to and then nothing happens as a result of what is said?
And that's really a moot point, isn't it?
Yeah.
And definitely we know that when you're listened to and nothing happens, that very quickly breeds cynicism and disengagement.
Yeah, absolutely. And
And
this co-design, were there any particular approaches that organizations were taking, or is it very individual to the different companies?
really individual, but there were some interesting things that came out. Like one of the things that Becca, so large, global engineering services company, really looking at sustainability, long-term work, but also partly shareholder owned. The customers own, sorry, the employees, a third of their employees are shareholders. So that's an interesting dynamic. But one of the things they identified was that you can ask people to say what's going wrong, what's the low value work that we should eliminate that doesn't add to value for our customers, doesn't add to profitability. If you you can ask people to do that individually, but if you bring groups of people whose work impacts each other together and do that collectively, it's empowering and people spark off each other and people affirm and validate each other. And it tends to be easier to reach agreement on and commitment to making change. So they found it more successful to do that work in groups rather than individually. Otherwise, there's so many. It depends on the organizations. Like I would say, the larger organizations like Mercury, ASB, Kiwi Bank, Spark, they all have deep, ongoing listening processes. I think it was Kiwi Bank when they were reworking their purpose. They spoke to, I think it might have been more than 95% of their staff. You know?
Small organization.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, but it's that, and it sounds easy to say listening, but what we're talking about is the kind of listening that comes from valuing your staff for the knowledge they have about the job they do. Yeah.
Wow.
And that's,
Sorry, it's just that valuing your staff just in itself, truly valuing your staff for the knowledge and what they bring to the role. Boom. Like, wow.
yeah. And I think, you know, I was a management consultant, so I think I can feel free to say this. I mean, KPMG, Deloitte, so many organizations for so many decades, there was a culture of we need to make change, we need to right size, restructure, downsize, whatever. We better bring in some experts to do it. Let's bring in the management consultants and have a change process and redesign. And completely ignoring the fact that you have people in your organization with a deep understanding of your systems and how they impact your customers and how they impact the employee's ability to do a good job.
It sounds so silly, but the revolutionary aspect is talk inside first. Ask your people.
Completely.
Listen to what they've got to say.
Yeah. And then the second theme was a culture of care and support. And that kind of follow, you know, all of these are interlinked, aren't they? If you really value your people and you value what they bring, you probably also value how they're doing. So what we saw across these organizations, and it's kind of a no-brainer really, isn't it? That life's got hard. Life is complex. People's day-to-day lives are complex, and we've been expecting them to do more and more at work. And, you know, Jared Har's work showed that 1 in 2 Kiwis at work was at risk of severe burnout. And that ranged from a low of about 25% with people in IT to a high of 89% of clerical staff.
Wow.
Largely driven this year by insecurity with layoffs. So we know that uncertainty and lack of clarity drives burnout. So these are organizations who are saying, we've got to do something about this. And they have put in place much more mental health and compassionate leave. Some of them are providing health, a lot of these are providing health insurance, which isn't a given in New Zealand, but some, like the scaffolding company, are also providing life and trauma insurance to their people. They are also providing, and a number of organizations are doing this, are providing all-day breakfast on site.
Wow.
Another organization I talked to said team leaders had noticed that in their breaks through the day, numbers of staff were only eating at one break. You know, people are going hungry. What can we do? Well, we can feed them when they're here. We can provide food. And as well as being compassionate and humane, it's sound business. Hungry people do not do good work. Yeah. I mean, and that's what's driven the breakfast in schools
Mm.
movement as well, saying hungry kids can't learn. So these are organizations who are really looking at their people and seeing what's going on and saying, how can we help? In a number of these organizations, they realized that there is still stigma attached to mental health leave.
Mm.
So in some of these organizations, they've bundled up their compassionate leave for bereavement, their sick, not sick leave, but other discretionary leave like mental health leave, and said, this is just all comes under the rubric supported leave.
Wow.
And and that's all you have to put in, and it's kind of nobody's business what kind of supported leave it is. And they
Wow.
said that's making a difference.
I can imagine in some places where people, as you say, there's still a bit of a stigma attached to it, or they don't want to admit it, or they value their own privacy. That could be really
Yeah.
game changing. Such a simple idea.
And then within this, we've seen companies really reviewing their benefits in a
Mhm.
number of ways. Now, and there's the cynical among us go, yeah, that's just to be more attractive in a competitive job market. But I think there is that and more. So that includes things like saying, do we have a menopause policy?
Mm.
Um, when can you access our policy? So from day one, you could have maternity leave or parental leave. From day one, you are covered for prior conditions, you and your family. But really interesting to see these organizations going, yes, it's tough at work and we need to do something about it. Kiwi Bank has introduced this idea of a quarterly wellbeing day. And what is really smart about it is the fact it doesn't accrue. So they said, their most dedicated workers who are really engaged and in many organizations are therefore most at risk of burnout. But in a lot of organizations, they say people are accruing their leave. They're actually not taking it. So the wellbeing day every quarter is a use it or lose it.
I had a conversation just the other day around with somebody around the New Zealand approach to annual leave and the accruing. It is not healthy. And coming from the UK, where it was considered, I'm a bit out of touch, I've been here for a while, but it was considered actually health and safety legislation. And you could only ever carry forward maximum of 5 days, and you had to take it within the first quarter. And again, some of that may have changed, but you talk to people here who've saved up all year, they get to this time of year, December, and they're ready to take leave. And some people who've got 6, 8, 10 weeks up their sleeve that's accrued.
Yeah.
It's a big contributor to the well-being and the resilience and the burnout,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
And I understand the desire for flexibility. I understand that, you may be doing a big overseas trip and you want to accrue some leave, but surely we need to be aware of the fact that if no one's taking leave and people need their breaks to recharge, it's a risk. Yeah.
Well, it's the part that you said there, the really engaged, high-performing, diligent employees are often the ones really at high risk of this.
Completely. The ones, and interesting, anyone who works in well-being,
Yeah.
anything that you regard as a vocation or a passion that you
Yeah.
don't turn off from, more at risk. Yeah.
So we've got these themes around listening and co-designing and really caring for people. Any other things that came out, Denise?
So it's kind of, they kind of follow, don't they? That it's not just about listening. It's not just about care, but actually the co-design part speaks to what happens next. And that is changing ways of working, saying what does a future fit workplace look like? And acknowledging that the ways we've been working haven't been working for people.
Mm.
And this, honestly, this is the one that really made me cheer because I have been advocating for human sustainability in the workplace as as important a concept as ecological sustainability. You know, we cannot keep fracking human resources and run people into the ground and go, throw it away, get another one. Um, and so lovely to see organizations going, yeah, we've got to think about how do we do this? And so these organizations, the Kiwi Bank's commitment, a lot of them have a commitment to flexibility and hybrid working. They're like, we have to find our way through this. It's here to stay. And Kiwi Bank, they talked about finding the flex within the flex. So we've got to be flexible, and we've got to, and saying this is an ongoing, continuous conversation. It's where's the flexibility that works for the person, and where's the flexibility for the team and the branch and the full organization, and saying, you know, within any organization and for people's needs, we've got to be able to flex.
I love that. And I have to just draw attention to that line because I've heard you say it before and it resonated so strongly with me, this, we have to stop fracking human resources. Bears repeating, I think, because it is such an important point. And what you said there about this concept of human sustainability, I just love that. Love that.
Yeah, and I think we really have, in the same way that at some point we did think you could just keep fishing the seas, putting whatever you wanted into the ground, without any thought, that we now know we've got to close those loops and think about, you know, we think about polluter pays as a concept. That yes, you've made a product and it's causing huge harm over here. You got to pay for the cleanup. And I think, imagine if we had a concept at work where the harmer pays already. And actually, in New Zealand, we already have that in terms of accidents.
Yes.
Because ACC, the Accident Compensation Corporation, or some initial, you know, whatever the right one is, if, you know, the industries that have poorer health and safety and that have higher levels of accidents and mortality get charged a higher levy. Imagine if the same thing happened to mental health. You know, imagine if you were able to say, this organization is chewing through people. This organization, and I know we're not going to do this because of the complexity, but imagine a large network map that showed the stress some employees are under and the losses and the harm in terms of absence from family responsibility, strained family relationships, impact on kids, impact on family units, lack of support for community. Imagine if you could map all of that and say, clean it up, you know?
Yeah.
And these organizations aren't forced to, but I think that this is what they're doing. They're saying, how do we care for our people? And ASB really and Kiwi Bank both have a real commitment to their people's development and their people's ability to do work in their communities. Like they know that people want to be able to support their communities. One of the things ASB talks about is we want to be able to equip our people with skills that they want to share in their community. We know it matters to people to support their kids' sport teams and different things and, you know, and be on local trusts and boards. So,
I'm just thinking about how all those contribute in various different well-being models, how community and connection is such a big important part of it. It's not just, you know, we talk about value and meaning and physical health and spirituality and relationships and all of those kind of things. And connection and community really matters. So it's lovely to hear of examples of that being taken into account for the benefit of the community, the individual and the employer ultimately.
Going, this matters. If we really want our people to stay with us and feel that we care about them, we need to care about what matters to them. So, and we go from like that big picture to um, some of the smaller, but also really important changes, like um, shifting the default meeting booking system for all of the organization from an hour to 50 minutes.
Yeah.
Meetings are by default 50 minutes. Um, and at KiwiBank, they also said, and here's the protocol on what a well-run meeting looks like. And I think how many of us have sat through poorly planned, poorly agendaed, poorly run meetings that have wasted everybody's time.
Yeah.
And
And you
so
think
it's saying,
there's an hour I'll never get back in my life.
yeah, well, and now it's 50 minutes and there
Yeah.
has to be an agenda. You have to have a good reason why people are there. And here's how you run the meeting effectively. Um, and then the other big two other ones really to refer to here would be the what we already talked about with cutting low value work. In Becca, they're calling it simplification.
Hmm.
We know that any organization where there's lots of new changes bolted on, or we've got a new HR system, we've got a new payroll system, we've got this new operational system, and they don't all work together well. And there's a lot of really glitchy stuff. And so people end up doing repetitive or low value work that doesn't add anything. And so it's a really growing trend to go, where's the low value work and how could we cut this out?
Mm.
And what these organizations are saying, streamlined, effective work processes make workers able, more easy for workers to do their job well. So they improve the workers' job satisfaction and they make it easier for workers to do a good job for customers.
Mm. Win-win.
Yeah. And they're
And
saying ultimately it benefits the customer.
yeah, so it ties into, it's usually a key question in engagement surveys. Does my work matter? Did it make a difference to somebody? So if you're sitting doing process after process and sitting in endless meetings, that's not
Thinking we could
satisfying.
do without this or I could do this better.
Yeah.
Um, if you think about the number of times you'll hear people say, God, this is a terrible system. I know it would be much better if, and it's actually
Mm.
listening to that.
Yeah.
The other one I would say is a real emphasis on feedback culture,
Hmm.
really realizing that the organization can grow when people share what they're learning. And this is like I love in Paper Kite, a digital design company, they really take that kind of software development ethos of you've done something, submit it for feedback. Why? And they view it as a sign of arrogance if you're not willing to submit your work to someone else for feedback.
Wow.
You know, and within that is the belief that we can always learn from other people.
Mhm. And that in itself is something that many of the organizations that I've worked with really struggle with. And you alluded to the leadership characteristics earlier around growth mindset and being able to have difficult conversations. People want that. And yet so many organizations struggle with having feedback conversations, having failures and learning from failures. Like that is a word that is undesirable and people shy away from it. So
At Paper Kite, their annual review is an annual celebration of what you've done. But one of the things that they're looking at on their scorecard is, are you getting feedback? Are
nice.
you getting feedback? Are you giving feedback? How are you contributing to what they call the development of their collective genius?
Oh, I love that.
And that organization actually makes time on a weekly basis for people to share their work and get feedback together.
Wow. And it's what's that old saying? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Like getting the,
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
collective minds involved. How
Yeah.
wonderful.
So now I realize I should have given you the full list first, but we're now to number four. And the other theme was purpose and belonging. And again, this is work that really did gladden my heart. So it was acknowledging probably Mercury, I think, said it best in that they said, our purpose statement used to be something to market to people.
Mm-hmm.
Now we've turned it inward, and our purpose statement is to capture why our people come to work and remind them of that.
I love it.
You know, and it's saying we we know that purpose matters for engagement and belonging, and this realization that a sense of purpose, a shared sense of purpose, really helps build a sense of belonging to an organization.
Wow.
And how powerful that is. And so a lot of work happening on that. Um, Spark, Kiwi Bank, ASB all have done a lot of work on their purpose and mission, and knowing that belonging really does drive well-being and performance. ASB had done a lot of work on what their people want and what the organization needs to commit to, and their people promise is we see you, we back you, we lift you. So it's being valued for who you are, being backed to have autonomy, to learn, to really to make mistakes and grow. And then we lift you, that we will support you to learn, develop, and grow laterally through the organization to become what you want to become and stay with the organization. That's their aspiration.
Wow. And that, we see you, we back you, we lift you again. Who wouldn't want to work there? They're going to have people queuing up applying for jobs. Wow.
Yeah. And interestingly, when you followed through, all of the managers are held accountable for the people promise. In what way are you seeing, backing, and lifting your people? It's
I love
not
it.
just something that happens at the top level. It's like
Or just a poster on a wall, because that's what often happens as well.
how are you enacting it, Um, and in some of these organizations, they talked about the shared purpose mattering, and that this isn't just a top-down thing. In some of the organizations like Becca, where sustainability is at the core of their work, they said it's our younger staff who are driving advocacy and really influencing and shaping our policy.
Wow. So back to that co-design piece.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then the last one would be the leadership and development piece. And that was really about, in all these organizations, there's an acknowledgement that they need to grow future fit leadership. And how that is done is through empowerment, connection, and adaptability. They are the three big ones coming through here of saying, if we want to be able to do what we want to do, to grow, to learn, to adapt to uncertainty and change, we need to empower people. And I love this because it aligns really well with what I've been talking about as way power leadership for several years, of saying, willpower is great when you know where you're going and it's an 8-line superhighway. But in uncertain times, you need way power. And that's that commitment to search for possibilities and to be able to harness and unleash the full human potential of your team to be part of that search. And so these organizations really were clear that the era of the leader as know-all expert and command and control is no longer fit for purpose.
Hallelujah.
Yeah. And it's that sense that the task of the leader is to ask the good questions, to be able to really empower people to bring their best, to share, and then kind of all of the stuff that flows from that, of being able to collaborate, being able to be more flexible and adaptable to change. Which kind of, and all the bits people don't like, that we have to be okay with people trying new things and making mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And interestingly, it's coming through in some of the conversation, some of the language in these organizations. They talk about, is it fit for now? You
Mm,
know, if you need to get things done quickly and make change and keep a large organization, you know, merging or functioning or changing, is it fit for now?
mm,
It might not be perfect, but we've got to get it out the door
mm,
now. Um, Other organizations talk about introducing experiments,
mm.
you
Yeah.
know, and if it works, we'll keep it and saying it's not forever. This may not be forever. It's an experiment.
Which, given the rate of change and the complexity and the ambiguity that we're all dealing with, makes perfect sense. Getting something that's fit for now, getting it done, done is better than perfect,
Yeah,
and taking that experimental, curious kind of
yeah,
approach sounds like a really great way
yeah.
to do things.
And I think you know, just that sense that um, that leadership or model of leadership is really changing.
Mm.
Mm. And
Which
some,
warms my heart.
yeah, and you know, I was really heartened by the commitment to looking after people and the commitment to learning, growing, and changing that I saw in these organizations. You know, in a number of them, and I'm thinking the ones that hop out are like Spark and Becca. They were like, for some of our senior people who've been here a long time, this feels challenging. So we need to give them tools to do it.
Mm.
Becca trained their leaders in um, uh, how do you lead through hybrid work?
Mm.
Because there were some leaders who were used to having everybody in front of them in the office. And it's like, how do you manage effectively
Yeah.
when it's a hybrid situation? And at Spark, they've put more than 600 of their leaders through leadership training that is all about how do you empower people? How do you look after people's mental health? And I really love one of the things that they did was say, um, if you're a leader, be a leader. Share your own story. And these are leaders sharing stories of vulnerability,
Mm.
um, their own mental health struggles, their own family challenges, um, and doing it and saying, be a person, share your story. And that I think has been really powerful. And we know we've seen that when leaders will front up and answer questions like Mercury talked about, the single most effective thing they did through COVID was put their senior leaders every week in an AMA, Ask Me Anything session in the morning online where people can hop on Zoom and ask anything of their leaders. You know, so that transparency and that fronting up really, really all helps build that sense of confidence in people.
Mm.
Yeah.
Amazing. And again, that echoes experiences I've had when any time I've run a leadership development program, by far the bit that people value the most is senior leaders sharing their stories.
Yeah.
Time and time again, it humanizes them. It makes them realize that, it's a journey. It's not, there isn't an infinite point or there isn't a finite point that you're done as a leader. You're always learning. There's always things.
And Kiwi Bank are talking about leadership as self-navigation. And I
Nice.
love that. And I'm going, we need people we need everyone to be able to self-navigate, to have self-awareness, to be able to coach. These are core skills. And in a really lovely sign, they developed this new leadership program around navigation. And the standard default would be to roll it out from the top down. And they said, hang on, we keep saying everyone's a leader and everyone has to be able to self-lead. We need to roll it out to everybody together, you know?
Wow.
And I think it's those kind of changes. And I also think from a training perspective, can you imagine if the leadership course has people from mixed levels, how much richer it can be?
100%.
And the networking and communication and relationships that are
Yeah.
built. Yeah.
And it's that walking the talk, because we said before, we don't want these things to just be words on a poster.
Yeah.
It's what happens with the intention, and having lead team developed in isolation quietly, there's no transparency. We don't know whether they're actually doing it. We get to, when they're as part of the mixed group, they're in it and they're being held to account and all eyes are on them. And that's really useful and beneficial for role modeling what is wanted.
Yeah. And I think so they were the 5 themes. And then literally it might have been a few weeks after I'd kind of gone through them and checked them that I was describing them to somebody and I said, what I'm also hearing in these organizations are changing aspirations. And I think it's the kernel of changing criteria for success. Success in these organizations is not just a financial metric. Success is also winning for their people, with their people. It's being the kind of employer that gives people purpose, that contributes to community. And the most developed or pronounced example of it really would be at Paper Kite, where the leadership, they described working with one employee who needed flexibility to be able to do what was really important for their personal goals, and saying, you can fit work around your life.
Oh, love it.
And I think that's one of the things that I see in these organizations. It's not always articulated, but the sense that the lives of the people who come to work for us matter. And having a role, taking this much of their time, them dedicating their lives to us, we have a responsibility back.
And it's just, as you say that, Denise, it's such a simple flip, but it just resonates so strongly. Why should work, even though most people spend proportionately more time at work than they do outside of work, why should life not fit around work?
Yeah.
Sorry, why should work not fit around life?
And I've been saying recently to people, saying to leaders, remember, these are human beings who come to work and their lives will always be much more important than your job. And remember that. And I think the good leaders do, And I've been looking at something recently where, like in some large organizations, particularly in the US, incredibly stringent, harsh conditions around bereavement leave. The good managers find ways to flex it for people.
Yeah.
But they shouldn't have to be finding ways round their own systems, So.
Well, from everything that you're describing, Denise, it feels like a sense of hope. I'm excited to hear that there are organizations in this country doing this work, making work better, doing great things, role modeling. For anybody that's listening to this now who is thinking, I want to help transition my organization, make it more like that. Maybe they're already on the pathway. Maybe they've got a long way to go, but what would you say to them? What's the key message that you would give somebody who wants to make work better for their people?
I think the core is, don't assume that you know what you need to do to make work better. Listen and co-design. And that doesn't have to be, oh my God, we're going to change the whole organization today. You can do it in tiny little fractals, The simplest thing you could do would be, in your one-on-ones with people, ask, what's the work you do in your job that you think is low value and reduces your job satisfaction? And how could we change it? It's a really great question to ask a team. What, of everything this team does, what's the one thing that you really feel is the lowest value, that grinds your gears and doesn't add anything to productivity, profitability, or customer satisfaction? And that's a small way in. And it's that small way in offers, it says, we see you, we trust you, we know that your understanding and knowledge is worth listening to, and we're prepared to work with you to make change. So it allows you to do listening and co-design, care and support, and changing ways of working. And you're being the kind of leader we need when you do that, because this is fundamentally an empowering, it's giving people more autonomy. It's fundamentally an empowering act as a leader.
And I love that. Sorry.
It doesn't have to start big. It can start as small as single one-on-ones.
The fractal word was just so great with that. But the other thing to me that's like great news for leaders, if you hadn't figured this out before, you don't need to have all the answers. Get your team involved. Like that seems like a key message that you're giving us here is listen to people, co-design, but that takes the weight off you as a leader, takes the pressure off.
Your job in the boat as the leader is not to be the expert. It's to actually get everyone in the boat feeling they can trust you because they know that you will be willing to learn from mistakes, willing to take everybody's views on board and work together. And I think I think that is cause for hope, because one of the things we've talked about is that people need a sense of hope, and I'm saying people don't need this kind of false hope as I'm a chest thumping brilliant, I'm the best, follow me. They need the kind of hope that comes from saying, I really trust our process. I really trust how adaptive we are. I trust our purpose. I trust how adaptive we are in getting there. I trust our ability to own up to mistakes, to learn and to grow. It's all of that stuff that really does inspire people to follow leaders. Yeah.
Wow. Fantastic. I love it so much. It's a brilliant piece of work. Do you have plans to expand on the study, Denise?
Well, for next year, I think this podcast for 2025, this podcast series, and I am curious. I know that I will go back to these organizations and say, what else are you doing? And to keep listening for other organizations. I'm not sure where it will go, but I think it's important that we're at a point in time where things are changing, where we are facing more uncertainty, and we really do need people to be able to step up and embrace that uncertainty and acknowledge that we can work effectively through it, but we are going to have to make some change.
Yeah. Wow.
Now, to finish, can I ask you some questions?
How rude. Hang on. I thought I was asking you a question. Sure.
Okay. Who's one person who's made work better for you?
This is going to sound like such a setup, but it's you.
Oh, no way.
And I'll tell you why. Because it was when we did the diploma together, the Langley Group Diploma in Positive Psychology and Wellbeing, which you so beautifully facilitated for me a few years ago. That shifted my outlook on so many different things, and that really did make work better for me, not least because I was able to introduce positive psychology into my view of the world and the work that I do, but also just because it triggered a whole lot of changes in what was meaningful for me, what work I wanted to do, all that kind of thing. So whilst that sounds like you bribed me.
Thank you. Oh, I'm going to have to share this with Sue Langley. She will be so thrilled to hear the diploma is on your list like this.
Absolutely.
And what about an organization change or initiative that's made work better for you?
An organization change or initiative that's made work better for me. It's interesting because it's a while, I work mostly independently, so it's a while since I've been inside an organization. It's not necessarily an initiative as much as it's the people that I've worked with. Having great leaders and having great people to bounce ideas off, to share the tough days with, all that kind of thing has been what's made the biggest difference. I've got close friends from 20 plus years ago because maybe we trauma bonded over difficult workplaces. So it's not so much an initiative, but that's a great question for me to take away and think about, actually.
But for you, it's the people you can connect with. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, it really
Having,
is.
and they are, I think of it as good sounding boards, good supports, good challenges. Yeah.
Absolutely. The people that you can have a laugh with, have a robust discussion with, and feel like you're making a difference, that you're doing good work together. That's gold for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what are you currently doing to make your work better?
Oh. So, I've got a new motto going into the new year, which I can't remember who said it originally, but discipline equals freedom. And that, have you heard that? You've not heard that one?
Mm.
I can't attribute it that to somebody. I can't remember where I heard it first. But for me, it's around absolutely building in more routine and rhythm around the must-dos, the admin tasks, the things that I don't love, the structure, setting up my day more robustly to make work better. Carving out the when I'm my good creative time, structuring my day differently. That's what's going to make work better for me going into the new
I
year.
love it. I love it. It's like ma- because I think sometimes those tasks hang over me like a black cloud. And if I can actually knuckle down and get them done in a structured way, then like you say, there's more freedom to do the stuff you want to do.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm actually inspired by what you shared from the organizations is talking to myself around, as a solopreneur, I don't have a team, but how can I brainstorm with myself? Where's the low value stuff that I can outsource or streamline or get rid of?
Absolutely. And I think all of us who are, working in that way, it's like how do we find the buddy to have these conversations with?
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. May I ask that question back to you then? How are you
Okay,
making
yeah.
work better?
So what was it? Which one?
What are you currently doing to make your work better?
Um, well, one of my goals that I kind of identified at the last diploma, um, was rest and peace, as opposed to rest in peace. And my goal is space between things.
Mm.
So I'm really inclined to hit my desk and keep going. And when I'm in my home office, my partner will come in and go, lunch? Lunch? And I'll just be like, no, I just got to get this done. And I tend to go from one thing straight on to the other and go until I drop. And so it's saying, and one of the things that I've learned from working with Lucy Hone is she's great at going, that's it for today, done. Um, but also saying there needs to be rest and recovery in the day. So for me, this is taking on board what I tell other people and saying, where are my micro breaks and how can I make them better for me?
Mm.
You know, and then so that's at the micro level, and at the big picture level, it's acknowledging that I want to do more of the work that really feeds me, that feels like why I'm here. And that's like the 6-day diploma, to do longer retreats with people, and then maybe even some shorter work online that allows me to do some of the transformative work with people, to kind of go below the surface and talk about the stuff that really gets in our way and how we
Mm.
might change that.
Wow, love it. And can I ask who's one person that's made work better for you?
Well, funnily, when I was thinking about these questions for you, I was like, oh, who would I? And um, two people who stand out would be what I've got from Lucy Hone, but also from my PhD supervisor, Nick Swain, was this sense of cut to the chase, get it done, get it out the door. You know, that there's only so much, this is part of the done is better than good sometimes. Um, and they've made work better for me. But also, honestly, clients.
Mm.
I did work recently up in Northland with Tamoko Services, which is an organization of psychologists and social workers and people who just are working to help those who really need support in their community. And it's always such a privilege to sit and work with clients and feel that I'm being of use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Well, I know that you're of use. You're more than of use, Denise. I've had the great pleasure of experiencing work from you, and anybody that gets to work with you is very fortunate. How can people contact you? How can they read this, the report from your survey, and how can they find out more about working together?
Okay. So what we can do is I will put a link to the report and to the website in show notes. And then I'll also put links in for you and for me for LinkedIn. If people want to follow updates, they can find either of us there.
Fantastic. Well, Denise, thank you for doing this work, for giving us this hope, for sharing all the insights with organisations. It certainly feels really exciting to know that there's so many great organisations out there, and I look forward to hearing more.
Such a delight to get to chat with you, Ruth. Thank you to you and to all our listeners. Please keep listening to this series to hear my conversations with the amazing organisations we've been discussing today. Bye for now. You've been listening to Making Work Better, recorded for RFM Dunedin. To learn more about how you can make work better for yourself, your team or your workplace, keep listening to this series and go to nziwr.co.nz to download your free copy of the Making Work Better report. Thanks for listening today. If you've enjoyed the show, please rate the podcast to help others who might benefit from it find it more easily.
This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.